Minnesota just made the most questionable trade in WNBA history. They willingly brought DiJonai Carrington into their championship locker room, and honestly, this might be the move that ruins their entire season. We're talking about a player whose highlight reel looks more like a crime scene investigation than basketball footage. The Lynx were sitting pretty with the best record in the league, positioned perfectly for another title run. Then they decided to blow it all up by trading for the most controversial player in professional basketball. This isn't just about talent anymore. This is about a franchise that just invited chaos into paradise. Here's what nobody's talking about. Dallas didn't just trade DiJonai Carrington because of poor performance. They got rid of her because she became completely unmanageable, and now Minnesota thinks they can somehow fix what an entire organization couldn't handle. The infamous Caitlin Clark incident wasn't just a basketball play gone wrong. It was a calculated attack that revealed exactly who DiJonai Carrington really is as a competitor. October 2024, playoff atmosphere. National television audience watching the rookie sensation take on the defending conference champions. Clark catches the ball in rhythm, starts her shooting motion, and Carrington makes her move. But instead of contesting the shot like a normal defender, she goes directly for Clark's face with deliberate precision. The impact sends Clark stumbling backward, immediately clutching her eye while Carrington walks away like nothing happened. The visual was devastating. America's newest basketball sweetheart left with a black eye courtesy of a player who seemed proud of what she'd accomplished. But the real shock came in the aftermath when Carrington showed absolutely zero remorse, instead choosing to mock the situation on social media. This wasn't heat of the moment intensity or competitive fire. This was premeditated targeting of the league's biggest star, executed with surgical precision during the most watched game of the season. The fact that no foul was called made it even more egregious, as if Carrington had figured out how to hurt people without consequences. What happened next should have been a wake-up call for every team in the league. Instead of learning from the backlash, Carrington doubled down on her approach, creating a pattern of dangerous behavior that would define her entire 2024 campaign. But the Clark incident was just the beginning of DiJonai Carrington's descent into basketball infamy. What followed was a season-long masterclass in how to alienate everyone around you while destroying your own career prospects in the process.
The flagrant fouls started piling up at an unprecedented rate. 4 separate incidents where officials had to step in and declare her contact excessive and dangerous. Each time, the same targeting behavior emerged. Star players getting hit in vulnerable areas during plays that had nothing to do with legitimate defense. The most telling part wasn't just the frequency of these incidents, but the consistency of her targets. Established veterans, rising rookies, championship-level players, anyone with a reputation became fair game for Carrington's brand of basketball terrorism. Players around the league started changing how they approached games against her teams. Veterans began warning rookies about her tendencies, coaches started designing plays specifically to keep their stars away from her defensive assignments, and officials began watching her more closely than any other player in the league. The psychological impact extended beyond just the players she targeted. Teammates started expressing concerns about practicing against her, worried that her reckless approach might carry over into team sessions. When your own players are afraid of getting hurt during practice, you've crossed a line that no professional organization can ignore. Dallas thought they were getting a defensive stopper when they acquired Carrington. Instead, they got a player whose reputation preceded her into every arena, creating hostile environments and uncomfortable situations that had nothing to do with winning basketball games. The trade details tell you everything about how badly Dallas wanted to get rid of this problem. They didn't just move Carrington for salary cap relief or future considerations. They actively upgraded their roster while simultaneously clearing out their biggest headache. Diamond Miller represents everything Dallas actually wanted in a young defender. Second overall draft pick, all rookie team honors, and most importantly, a professional approach that builds winning culture instead of destroying it. Her three-point shooting has been exceptional, but it's her character that makes her valuable to a franchise trying to build something sustainable. Carly Samuelson brings veteran leadership and championship experience without any of the drama that came with Carrington's presence. Even dealing with injury concerns, she represents the type of player that teammates respect and opponents fear for the right reasons. The fact that Dallas also received a future draft pick shows just how eager they were to complete this deal. They essentially paid Minnesota to take their problem while improving their own roster in multiple areas. That's not a typical trade scenario. That's organizational relief disguised as basketball business.
But there's one incident that perfectly captures why DiJonai Carrington became impossible to manage, and it happened after a game against the Chicago Sky. Picture this. A professional referee, someone trained to handle heated exchanges with elite athletes, felt so uncomfortable during a conversation with Carrington that he called for security backup. This wasn't about a disputed call or competitive frustration. This was about a player creating such a hostile atmosphere that a league official needed protection just to do his job. The referee in question was Roy Golbayan, a veteran official who's handled countless difficult situations throughout his career. What makes this even more shocking is that the game was already over. This wasn't heat of the moment intensity during live action. This was post-game interaction that somehow escalated to the point where security intervention became necessary. Think about what has to happen for a trained professional to feel unsafe enough to call for backup during what should be routine communication. Carrington's response on social media made the situation infinitely worse. Instead of acknowledging that maybe her approach was problematic, she posted about having a civil conversation while completely missing the point that civil conversations don't require security presence. The lack of self-awareness was staggering. Here's what this incident really revealed. Carrington's problems extend far beyond aggressive play on the court. When you're creating hostile situations with league officials during routine interactions, you've crossed into territory that no professional organization can tolerate. Referees talk to each other, and word spreads quickly when a player becomes known for creating uncomfortable situations. The ripple effect was immediate. Officials around the league started treating Carrington differently, knowing they were dealing with someone whose behavior patterns had become unpredictable and potentially problematic. When referees need security backup to handle you, you're not playing professional basketball anymore. You're creating an environment that threatens the basic functioning of the game itself. This incident became the final piece of evidence that Dallas needed to make their decision. They realized they weren't just dealing with a player who made questionable choices during games. They were dealing with someone whose approach to professional relationships had become fundamentally broken. That's not something you can coach or manage away through team meetings and conversations. The fact that Minnesota chose to acquire a player with this type of baggage shows just how desperate they were for defensive help, or how badly they misjudged the severity of the situation they were inheriting.
Wings fans celebrated this trade like they just won the lottery, and you can understand why. They're finally free from the constant embarrassment of having to defend behavior that went against everything professional basketball should represent. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Minnesota's decision to acquire Carrington reveals something deeply concerning about their organizational priorities. The Lynx have built their reputation on professionalism, championship culture, and doing things the right way. Now they've willingly imported the exact opposite of those values. Cheryl Reeve has coached championship teams by emphasizing trust, communication, and collective responsibility. How does that philosophy work when you've added a player whose specialty is creating division and controversy wherever she goes? The timing makes it even more questionable. Minnesota made this move while sitting in first place, positioned perfectly for their 5th WNBA championship. They had everything working in their favor, then decided to gamble it all on a reclamation project that multiple organizations have already given up on. Championship teams are built on chemistry and trust. Players need to know their teammates will make smart decisions in crucial moments, not create unnecessary drama that becomes a distraction from the ultimate goal. Carrington's track record suggests she's incapable of that level of maturity. ESPN gave Minnesota an A- grade for this trade, but grades don't account for locker room dynamics or playoff pressure situations. When the games matter most and emotions run highest, will Carrington's intensity translate into positive contributions, or will her pattern of poor decision-making resurface at the worst possible moment? The internet's reaction to this trade revealed just how divided the basketball world has become over DiJonai Carrington's place in professional sports. Dallas fans treated the announcement like a national holiday, finally free from defending the indefensible on a daily basis. Minnesota fans found themselves in an impossible position, trusting their organization's track record while questioning whether this move contradicts everything their franchise has stood for. The cognitive dissonance was obvious in their reactions, wanting to support the trade while secretly worried about what they'd just inherited. But the most telling reactions came from neutral fans and analysts who couldn't understand why a championship contending team would willingly take on this level of baggage. The consensus seemed to be that Minnesota had made a deal with the devil, potentially sacrificing their championship culture for short-term defensive help.
Social media became a battleground between those who believe in second chances and those who think some behavior patterns are too concerning to overlook.
The divide revealed deeper questions about accountability in professional sports and whether talent should excuse consistently problematic conduct. The league office had to be watching this situation closely, knowing that how it plays out could set precedents for future discipline and trade scenarios involving controversial players. This trade represents a fascinating case study in organizational psychology and championship team building. Minnesota just bet their entire season on the idea that established winning culture can overcome individual toxicity, but history suggests that's not always how chemistry works. Championship runs require total buy-in from every player on the roster. Everyone needs to be pulling in the same direction, making sacrifices for the collective good, and maintaining focus when pressure mounts. Carrington's track record suggests she's incapable of that level of team-first thinking. The Lynx have created a situation where their championship hopes might depend on a player whose biggest moments have come from creating controversy rather than winning important games. That's not typically how successful title runs are constructed, but there's another angle to consider. What if Minnesota actually succeeds in channeling Carrington's intensity in positive directions? What if Cheryl Reeves' coaching ability really can transform a problematic player into a championship contributor? The redemption story would be incredible, but the risk of failure seems far greater than the potential reward. Dallas, meanwhile, positioned themselves perfectly for both immediate improvement and long-term success. They've cleared their roster of toxic behavior while acquiring legitimate talent that can contribute right away and help build around incoming superstar Paige Buchers. The Wings chose culture over controversy, professionalism over problematic talent, and sustainable success over short-term defensive help. Early reactions suggest they made the right call, proving that sometimes the best move a franchise can make is admitting their mistake and cutting their losses before the damage becomes irreparable.